Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Macon Stokes, who is the CEO over at Amplifier, which is a 3PL based down in Austin, Texas. And I got the chance to connect with Macon earlier at Parcel Forum. I think we connected at, and very
That's right.
interested in hearing about Amplifier, what they're doing, their story a little bit, and also about Macon's journey too. He started as a sales guy at Amplifier, and now he's the CEO, right? So that's
That's
a
right.
pretty interesting journey, right? So we're gonna dive into that a little bit, and we're also gonna talk a little bit about how they approach fulfillment and a little bit of some differences when you think about item customization versus shipment customization, which they're doing. We're gonna talk a little bit too about their Amplification, which is coming soon. So, Macon, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm super tickled that this comes out of just happening to be shoulder to shoulder at the Parcel Forum in I think it was near the drink line, right?
Yeah.
That's where we met and engaged. So I'm continually delighted and surprised when I go to one of those events. I'm like, I made new friends. It's really fun. I was like, oh, I got to go to this, but I always come out with a couple new friends. So I'm glad for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are great opportunities just to meet people, right? And just, figure out what other people are doing and people are doing like similar things too, or, just
Yes.
find those synergies overall. So it was great
Yeah.
to meet you there, definitely. And I've been connected with you
Yeah.
since. And now getting you on the podcast as well. So,
Right.
so why don't you tell us a little bit about Amplifier and kind
hmm
of the story of Amplifier too, and how it got started?
Sure. Right. So as you mentioned, amplifiers in Austin, and we are, see if I can use all the right jargony buzzwords, a D2C e-com 3PL. But I should also say omni-channel. And so we serve clients who have online stores who mainly are direct to consumer or for whom they want that to be a primary channel, right?
Mm,
So everybody has to sell everywhere all the time now. That's a
yeah.
thing. But some companies want their direct to consumer channel to be their main channel because for their product or for their philosophy, that generates the highest profit, right? They don't have
Right.
to share with a reseller. They don't have to share with a big box. They don't have to share with Amazon. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those folks or with sharing,
Right.
but clients who can sell directly to their customers typically get a higher share of the profit, and that's proper. So that's our focus, and our our origin, like a lot of um, e-commerce 3PLs, our origin starts with a brand.
Mm,
And so back in 2000, that the kids today might not realize that back in 2000, Amazon was still focusing on books.
yeah.
Remember, kids, that's where Amazon started. And the founders, one of the founders, had a brand. That brand was despair.com. Still
Mm,
exists.
okay.
You might look up. They're the original demotivational meme guys. They
Mm,
they started mocking successories, which in the late 90s, early 2000s was a thing. Not anymore. I mean, they're still a thing, but you only see them in the back of Sky Mall catalogs now. Um, the They had a an idea. They were selling calendars,
mm,
funny, humorous calendars. They thought that they were going to sell through brick and mortar bookstores back when there were real brick and mortar bookstores, and they happened to put up a website on Yahoo Stores. Before
okay.
Shopify, there was Yahoo Stores,
Yeah.
and that was the game, and they had a viral moment, and suddenly they were selling direct to consumer in a space where not very many people were, and they'd
Mm,
had a 3PL that was just good at taking in a pallet and reshuffling the pallet and sending it off to brick and mortar
yeah.
big boxes. And they were lovely people and didn't have any idea what they were doing with direct to consumer package fulfillment. And so here we have the same sort of origin story that a lot of people in our space now. It's like the founders thought, how hard could this be? We
Yeah.
should just do this ourselves. And as it turns out, it's super hard and took us
Yeah.
many years to get it right. so so we've been at it for now, it'll be like next year will be 25 years
Wow.
of
Okay.
doing this. So that's the origin.
Mm.
Then, like any good narrative, the hero the hero has success and then has a moment about, the 60%, 70% part of the story where there's a massive, like, is the hero going to die right now moment before the
Yeah.
hero sort of emerges again. So our moment there was, we got a client that that sold little yellow wristbands.
Mm.
Now they didn't sell them. You got them. You donated to the cause, and you
Okay.
got a little
Right.
yellow. You got a 10 pack of little yellow wristbands. You may have seen it on Oprah, right? That's sort of like this the beginning of the rubber wristband phase.
Mm.
Amplifier's client was the Lance Armstrong Foundation, and uh, and they started with us. And their view was, we're just going to sell a couple thousand of these, like, and we are one of our co-founders knew the folks at the Lance Armstrong Foundation, was there in the room and talking through like how are we going to help raise funds, and so Amplifier got that gig, and then they sold hundreds and hundreds of thousands
Oh yeah.
of
It was huge.
yellow
Yeah.
wristbands. Yes, and that that just about killed Amplifier.
Wow.
It was terrible, and we part of our technology story is related to that because we were using an off the shelf mail order manager. It was called Mail Order Manager,
Mm.
and it was purchased in a physical computer software store in the mall, like when we started. Like
Oh wow.
that's
You
what we
don't
were
see those
using.
anymore. Yeah.
No, they don't. Like there's so many so many
Yeah.
things. I'm like, we've been around for a minute, and what happened was crew was shipping like mad. Just it was nuts, and the system just stopped about
Mm.
halfway through in the afternoon. Could not figure out, it just wouldn't go anymore, and the team sort of worked their way up the development chain and got to the developer, the guy who wrote the code. And he's like, oh, I never imagined anybody using my software would ship more than 9,999 shipments of a particular service in a day. It's like
Yeah.
the field just doesn't go any bigger than that. He's like, so
Wow.
that's why this isn't a bug. This is just how that field is. And so he gave us another rev to give us another digit, and
Mm.
that was our moment where, like, maybe we should think about like real warehouse
Yeah.
management software. So it didn't kill us, but it gave us some operating cash, and it gave us a vision, for a technological vision, and a way to a place to go. So the brand start, and then like
Mm.
get the booster rockets to figure out, oh, there's something here. We should really get good at it after we like rise from the dead of getting just like
Mm.
crushed,
Yeah.
crushed by success. So that's
Yeah.
that's that's how we got going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a pretty interesting story there. And I think it's, very like, a lot of these 3PLs we see out there now that where, they started with the brand and just like you said, they're like, we can do this better, or, we don't like the way people do this. So let's do it
Right.
ourselves. Right.
Right.
And I'm curious, I mean, about the name Amplifier, because 25 years almost now, when I first saw the name Amplifier as the 3PL, like that's a very now sounding name, right? I mean, I was
Yeah.
thinking at first I was like, oh, Amplifier, this must be like a newer venture backed type fulfillment provider, right? But
I
25 years, I
wish.
mean, yeah, yeah. Like was that the original name? And tell us what the name came
Oh
from and what
man,
that means. Yeah.
that's I appreciate that, and that's an insightful question because it wasn't the original name. The
Okay.
original name was even more abstract and nerdy. The original name was Copernica. So
Okay.
Yeah, you're like, good job not keeping that.
Yeah.
So Amplifier is a DBA. Like our actual company name is Copernica Incorporated.
Interesting. Okay.
So so just, I mean, imagine a bunch of nerds, like just straight up nerds, techie guys, literature guys. None of us went to school for logistics.
Right.
Like we've got guys who started making their living mocking the corporate world. We've got classics majors, philosophy majors. Like that's just the sort of
Mm,
people who are doing this. And so, starting with a brand, um, the idea was, well, in the coming century, we're moving from, this is one of the things our founders coined, we're moving to product being not shelf aware
mm,
but self aware, right? Where there's a,
okay.
this thing is going to a another human directly, a self. It
Mm,
doesn't need to be configured to sit on a shelf, which is what everything was before that, right? You were Things were packaged to come out of the box and go on a shelf
right.
instead of packaged to like be handled by a human. And so there's this idea that, man, there's a revolution happening. There's a revolution in terms of how commerce is going to happen and how sales are going to happen and how fulfillment is going to happen. And this is all coming down to the self, the human. And so we're like, well, what's the other revolution that
Mm,
changed the way everybody understood the universe? It's like, well, obviously it's the Copernican revolution, right? Where we go from thinking about the sun, thinking about revolving around the earth to revolving around the sun. Like, so clearly that should be our name. Like
yeah.
we're communicating to the world. We understand that everybody's conception of the universe in commerce is changing. We should be called Copernica. And
Mm.
the thing was that we would get people like, "Hey, I'm trying to reach Copernica," and like early on, we're like, "Oh yeah, this is a really bad name." It
Yeah.
was clever,
Yeah. Definitely.
and named our values in what we were doing. So again, this is coming from one of our co-founders, Jeff Sewell,
Mm,
who's also a filmmaker, with his wife. Like
okay.
he he's he's somebody people should know. He makes amazing things. He's the chief product officer of Amplifier now.
Mm,
So the other metaphor, we're like, well, what's a better metaphor for what we're doing? And again, coming out of our brand experience, the thing that despair was doing when it started was it was dropping messages into the shipment as it went out.
mm,
And because it's a humor company,
yeah.
so that crew wanted to make jokes all the way through the
Mm,
experience. And so it was right after the dot-com bubble had burst, and there was a lot of things going on in the corporate techie world. And so if despair saw that the email address of the purchaser was coming from an investment banking group, they would make a joke on the packing slip, which is hand packed by a former investment banker, because
mm,
they were all going out of business, right? Or former .com owner. If they saw this is a famous .com thing, they were looking at their customer and making a joke about them.
okay.
And it was like the response for that, um, for despair, was the best sort of advertising they had ever gotten, which was
Mm,
people would like show their friends, like, look at this packing slip. Like,
yeah.
they see me. Like, these guys are funny all the way through, right?
Yeah.
And so our view was, wait a second, again, we're nerds, and so we're like, we'd read all Marshall McLuhan stuff, and we're like, oh, this the medium of fulfillment, like, it's a signal bearing structure. Like, you can send signals in this medium, which is the box and the experience of the package and all that stuff, and you can send a signal that's like to the person receiving it. And if we do that, it's going to help the overall signal of the brand. So that's what an amplifier does, right?
Yeah.
Like, a signal comes through, hits an amplifier, and all the amplifier does is increases the amplitude, and you actually don't care about the amplifier. Like, you care about the signal that's going through it, right? That's the
Right.
thing you care about. And so coming from brand centric folks are like, yes, it needs to be the fulfillment needs to be on time. It needs to be right.
Hmm.
But we can also send signal through it, and so that's where the name and the metaphor amplifier comes from. Is our view of what our clients as brands are doing, that they're sending signals through us.
Mm.
Now, is it is it clever? It's yes. And when you get it, and does it is the name inhabit our values and the goal and the aspiration? Yes. So
Hmm.
in that sense, super great name. Like you can have a great logo
I like the
and
logo.
and
Yeah.
it seems very like current.
Yeah.
Um, and also we're not ship noun or verb box, right? Or
Yeah.
that's it's good and bad, right? So the
Hmm.
good news is okay, you're signaling something different about you, but
Hmm.
also the first glance, wait, what do you do? Why don't you have box in your name, or why don't you have
Yeah.
ship in your name?
Yeah.
So they're like, huh, well, we like it, we'll stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I imagine too. I mean, I could see where some of these brands that are, they're looking for a partner fit that kind of thinks in the same way that they do too. So like,
Hmm.
recognizing like that branding that you guys have done in that, and differentiating yourselves a little bit there too as well. I mean, I think I can see that like resonating with some brands. That'd be like, oh, okay, these guys are kind of like on the same wavelength that we're on
Yes,
too. Yeah.
the metaphors work, right? Like it's you can't
Yeah.
it as a it's once you start using it, you're like, yeah, it's actually a really good metaphor. It's dumb
Yeah.
nerds.
Definitely, definitely. So we talked a little about Amplifier, right? And you've been with Amplifier for a little while too, as
Yeah,
well, right? So,
right.
but you tell us a little bit about your journey and what you've kind of seen over the whole transformation of the business. Because you started, if I understand correctly, I think I saw on the website that you started in sales side, right? And
That's
now
right.
obviously you're CEO, right, running a show.
That's
So,
right.
so tell us a little bit about that journey and kind of what you've seen in the industry over that time.
Well, so I was the philosophy major. I was philosophy major and
Okay.
math minor. Did not get into this because I was like, you know, what would be a really interesting industry to create a career in logistics. Like that
Yeah.
that that wasn't the play. I didn't even know you could go to school for it. And then 10 years
Yeah.
in, I'm like, hold on a second. Are you telling me Georgia Tech is like the place for logistics and like people have whole majors around this? I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
No wonder I fell behind. Yeah, so I've been at Amplifier for coming up on 20 years,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and so I knew about it because I knew about Amplifier because one of the co-founders is my brother-in-law, and my brother was the
Oh,
second
okay.
employee here. So
Uh,
that's how I knew about it, and I watched them start it, and as a deep nerd, I loved all the metaphors they were using, and I appreciated oh, things are going to be different. And yes, people who are coming up, people who were born after Google was invented, interact with the universe in a way that's different than people who were born before Google was invented.
mm,
People they have some expectation for what an online experience is like and how they should interact with any sort of vendors. Like, oh yeah, this is cool. So uh, I I watched from afar. I watched them get crushed with success by the Livestrong
mm,
Foundation, and then like a lot of 3PLs, especially at when the beginning stages of a 3PL, that Livestrong, after we shipped honestly 95% of all the yellow wristbands,
mm,
they got new management. They got a new chief operating officer, and she came in and said, "We're gonna go to the big boys now. Like we're gonna
mm.
go. Like we're gonna grow up." And so she took the business away.
Yeah.
Spoiler: they came back 3 years later after she left. However, at the time, that was an existential problem for
Mhm,
Amplifier, and they needed help in sales.
mm,
And so um, I'm okay at it, but also the important thing was they knew I'd get in and care a lot and understand what they're doing and sell. So I moved from Charlotte, where I'd been living with my wife and newborn kid. So it's super easy for me to know how long I've been working here because I'm like, how old is my son? Okay, right. Um, Also, vice versa. I'm like, how long have I been in Amplifier? How old are you?
Yeah.
Came and started in sales. I didn't know very much about like the sales as an industry. So I read a lot of books, which is a story of amplifiers. Like, how do we do this? I don't know. Read some books.
Read books. Yeah.
And and through circumstances that were beyond my control, I ended up closing, like being in a relationship with somebody and closing a major deal for
Mm.
Amplifier. It was a really, really big deal. It was like perfect. It's a perfect client, and they had a lot of volume. Like they were ideal client profile before people were using the terms ICP, right? It was
Okay.
just we just knew
Yeah.
like these are the guys. So, signed them, and like any good salesperson, I now know we sold it a little aspirationally. Like it was
Mm.
maybe a little bit more than we were actually going to be able to execute on, and so I because of all my relationships, like really cared. It wasn't like I sold it and like now it's operations problem. I was like, no, I know the guy that I sold this to,
Mm.
and I know I know not only will I going to get a call, like we're kind of friends, and I don't want this to be like bad for our friendship. So
Yeah.
so that in my relationships let me sort of like stay with it in the operation, right? Like
Mm.
I would go out on the floor and be like, okay, like we're not quite hitting the SLAs. Like how can we hit the SLAs? How are we going to get there? And I started getting into the operational side of the business. And what we discovered was, oh, I'm actually pretty good at that. Like that turns out to
Okay.
be a thing I'm quite good at naturally. And then basically had the permission of the company to like, yes, please get good at this faster
Mm.
so that we continue to make this client happy. And by the way, making this client happy is actually making everything else work even better.
Mm.
So I moved into that space and was and led the operation for about 10 years.
Mm.
I'm not good at the years if like it's in my LinkedIn, like you can see like exactly it might be off of like I don't remember that stuff very well, but
Mm.
moved into operations, cried all the tears, bled all the blood
Mm.
that a person learning operations on the fly and through our technology. Um, and moved into the uh, took over finance as well
Mhm.
eventually because at some point finance and operations are the same actually right like
Yeah. Okay.
if you want a functioning company like those can't be unhooked
Yeah.
and we're all of the leadership of the organization is very collegial and so
Mm.
it's fairly flat and so as we're growing the company it's like well okay, like you learn this thing, and like, okay, now you can do it. Like you're doing this better. I didn't want to do that anyway. So like you do that. Eventually became the president while Jeff was CEO.
Mm.
And at some point we realized, oh, actually, like I am pretty good at this. Why don't you take the CEO role and then Jeff moved into the chief product officer role, which
Mm.
is as the CEO, he had been developing the product along the way. And so this
Yeah.
sort of allowed him to really basically finish it off and let me um, toil under the Sisyphean burden of being a CEO. So I don't like when you could like graph, like if we're doing titles, like I guess
Mm.
success goes up into the right, but like existential dread and burden kind of like go also increases as you go.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So I'm curious there on the because I think that's an interesting inflection point, right? That you had where you made this sale, and as salespeople tend to do sometimes to us operation folks is oversell what we can
that's right.
actually do, right? And it sounds like you got yourself into a little bit of that pickle there. But
Yep.
you went out on the floor and you mentioned and you figured out how do we get to the point where hey we can meet these SLAs and we can deliver
Hmm.
for this client. So I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about what were some of the things I'm sure there's a lot of things you did, but what were some of, like, maybe the things that really started to move the needle, whether it was processes or system investments. I mean, what did you do in that time to get your team up to be able to meet these operational requirements and increase that capacity, where you mentioned, because I love that you mentioned that we were trying to do it for this one client, but then we saw that, oh, now it's starting to have a positive impact on all of these other clients too as well. So tell us a little bit about what did you go through, and what really started to move the needle for you from an operations perspective.
Yeah, we our our perspective on the operation was was sort of continuously informed by the software that we were using, like in the first place. Because we were following our own intuitions about
Mm,
what's efficient. Like, as I hadn't read the goal yet. Like, this was
yeah.
like this was before I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm
Mm.
so bummed that I went for like 10 years without even knowing the name of Eli Goldratt. Like that,
Yeah.
be- because when I read it, I was like, oh yes, of course. Like most operators' experience of reading him are like, yes, this guy sees me. Like
Mm,
he understands me. Um, but we were well read enough to like have some sense of like what flow is,
mm,
and understand that there's this thing out there called the Toyota production system, like that.
right.
Those like we were liberal arts kids, right? So like we're
Mhm,
like, okay, there's a universe out here, and there's things to learn. And we also bought into uh, after after Livestrong, we got ourselves into Manhattan Associates warehouse management
okay.
system,
Yeah.
which we didn't understand. We knew we'd bought ourselves a battleship, but like
Yeah.
that's what we thought. We didn't understand we'd gotten ourselves a carrier group.
Mm,
Like it was we have grown into using it. But the
mm,
very first thing was, because while we were, literature nerds, I minored in math, and we had developers who had sort of come along with us. We were all looking at the tables
mm,
in in Manhattan's product. Like, so it was on prem, had our own databases running it. So we're like, oh, look at the tables and the column names. Like, what
mm,
does this do? Like, why do they have a column? Why is there a column name for cart number? What's a cart? Right?
yeah.
Like, we're not just sort of walking around with a piece of paper and a bin. What's that mean? So our we would just sit and watch. I would just sit and watch the warehouse floor do a thing and think, wow, we're getting crowded over here. Like,
Mm,
maybe we should not be so crowded. Or this is how we got into carts. Like, I don't know. Again, my remembering years is not. I'm not good at it.
mm,
Call it 10 years ago, getting into carts. We I was watching somebody on the floor. I was running operations, watching somebody on the floor, and we were still using paper packing slips then. It was
mm,
more than 10 years ago. And what this picker was doing was, we give him a stack of packing slips that were his responsibility. He would look through them. He'd reshuffle them really quickly. He'd go grab a stack of bins and then like drag it to a location, and he would go do, 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 do. He would count how many. He was like, oh, widget is on these 10 things. He'd get 10 widgets and put them in the bins, and then like drag the bins and then go to the
mm,
next thing where he had the most things. And we're like, you know, like, that guy's not doing it right at all. This is not how he's supposed to be doing it. We told them, like, pick a
yeah.
shipment completely. Like, he's going to completely screw these up. It's like 10 at a time. He wasn't, but we're like, this is the risk, right? There's no
Mhm,
controls here. And I watched him for a little while longer. I was like, well, first, this could be more efficient if his like stack of bins had wheels on it. Like, we could make
yeah.
this go faster. And I'm watching him, like, he's picking fast. And so I mentioned it to the guys who configure our software in house. I'm like, man, I was just saying, like, man, like, we basically, this guy needs like a cart. And the guy's like, there's a field name, cart. in the table. Like, why don't we look at that? And it's like, oh, there's a checkbox in the warehouse configuration that's like, do you want to use carts? Like, yes. And like, what do those carts look like? And we're like, whoa, this is amazing. So
Yeah.
like that, the sort of the process of like just sitting like in the place, right? So the
Mhm.
Gemba, right? If we want to be sort of
Yeah.
precious, uh, precious nerds about it, right? Like just sitting in the place and watching people. And we're a small team. Like I know that people are like doing their best, so I'm already disposed to like, okay, we're all pulling together here, and that guy's doing something different, like, and it's looking successful. We should investigate and see what that is. And as it turns out, most of the things that humans do to become more efficient has already been mapped. Like,
Mm.
it's already known. The thing is just figuring out like what's the name for
Yeah.
this thing that this guy's doing, where he's grouping work based on location and then trying to do that work in one shot. Like, oh, the warehouse materials movement term for that is in this group cart picking, right? So it's
Yeah.
learning what the nouns are, and understanding that the humans are probably going to find best path,
Mhm.
and very likely somebody has already figured out how to put the controls around best path, to do that. If that's at the end of the day, you evaluate like, okay, that's a path, but it's not best path. So
Mm.
that was one thing. The other thing was the great gift, uh, the great gift of our warehouse, management system was the detail of the data. Like
Mm.
that's that there was there was no transaction that happened in any movement anywhere in the warehouse that couldn't be articulated in a line
Mm.
of data.
Right.
And so two things happened. One, we were looking at the data. I was looking at the data, and realized, oh, we could have more data here if we were using the RF guns instead of using
Mm.
paper. Like we could see all these things. And the second thing was we were getting a lot of errors, picking errors.
Yeah.
And so the the again, it's in the there's so so much pain and suffering clouds my ability to like remember the actual year. But in the far past,
Yeah.
we were in the far past, the night before Black Friday, we transitioned from paper to RF,
Mm.
because we were in such a. It wasn't like, oh, I got a long project plan. We're going to work all this out. It was like we're in such crisis
Yeah.
because we are getting so many errors. Like it's all backing up at the ship station, because at the ship station they're checking like, is this right? And it's like, no, we've got all these. We call them broken shipments. All these
Mm.
broken shipments. They're just piling up, and we can't tell who's picking it, and we can't tell if this is a picker error or if this is a problem in the slot. Like we have no idea. We have no visibility because we're just good as paper slips and we're handing them to people, and we don't even know if they're like finishing the stack,
Mm.
like because we can't get line clearance
Yeah.
because it's all stacking up at the ship station. And so the um, Jeff, and the other leadership at the time, I was just like running the floor and operations
Mm.
there.
Okay.
They made the call. They're like, we are switching to RF, and my view was, wow, this is crazy, and we can't not do it. And I'm super glad I don't have to be the one who chooses that. We're just going to do it,
Yeah.
right? So we did it, and then immediately you could see all the data,
Mm.
and that was the other piece of like, oh, now we can see where the errors are. Is this a
Mm.
human error? Is this somebody ignoring things? And we got a lot of pushback from the guy who actually was running the picking floor. He's like, we're going to be so much slower. He's like,
Mm.
because we had tested like how we knew how the RF worked and how to configure it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we hadn't implemented it. Partly because we'd gotten this feedback, which was like, dude, my pickers can pick this so much faster if they're not dealing with this gun, right?
Mm.
And so
Right.
at some point we're like, oh, Oh, it is a little slower.
Mm,
Actually, what we discovered is the fast people got a little slower, but
mm,
everybody else got a little faster.
mm,
And the best thing about it was the I had thought by standing on the floor and like watching, like I was learning a lot of things and making good judgments for the most part about like, here we need to try this. I had my view of who the best pickers were.
mm.
And that was because I'm watching these humans and the people who in my view were moving quickly. I was like, well, those guys must be the best.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, they were the worst.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
like
So
at
sometimes
every
the
level.
fastest picker is probably the most inaccurate picker, right? That's probably what you're
Well,
seeing, right?
and it varied. Like
Yeah.
and I was tempted to like graph his variance based on the number of cigarettes he'd had that day. Like because it really seemed related to that.
Yeah.
And we had these a couple older women
Mm,
who were pickers. I barely knew they were there. They were always inside the shelves doing their things, and they
mm.
were just constant the whole
Yeah.
day. No drama, no issues. And so the data comes up, and we're like, these people are the best pickers we've got.
Yeah.
And Johnny over here needs to get his act together.
Mm,
And then the look on those people's faces when we're like, hey, we see that you're the best, they were kind of like the simultaneously like, finally and thank you. It's
yeah.
like, yes. Like they know, like they know
Yeah.
that they're the ones doing the best work, but like that's gonna keep doing this, and Flash over there is gonna get all the glory, but I know I'm doing better than him.
Mm,
So it was super iterative, and we hit. I'd like to think that we hit every major problem that you can hit. I mean, I like to think it in this way that there
mm.
aren't very many more. We
Yeah.
didn't enjoy hitting them, but
Yeah.
we'd have the wrong intuition, which is like, oh, um, client is going to put on a sale, and so we're going to slot all the sale items in the same aisle. So like you can just very little travel. You can just
Mm,
pick it, go across. And we did that. And the next day, everything ground to a halt because we were trying to get 20 people into that aisle to pick things. And we're like, yeah, that was really, really dumb. Like,
mm.
oh, right. Like, it's not just pick path, it's also congestion.
Yeah.
And so, and we can't solve this problem by like stagger starting. Like, everything on this aisle is in every single shipment. So, like, we're going to spread it across and increase, you know, the travel distance, which is like in the textbook, that's a no-no.
Mm,
Uh, but you got to graph like travel distance with like congestion problem. Like there's an intersection where you're like, this is it. And I like to say like we did a lot of super math and figured it out. We're mostly like, if we do that again tomorrow, we're totally dead. So overnight,
mm.
like move everything across. So
Yeah.
that's sort of how we came to be where we are. And we watch like I watch peers in the industry, and I
Mhm.
watch like friends of mine who have brands who aren't my clients, but I love them anyway. Like them talk about like what's happening in their warehouses, and I'm like, oh, I really know that problem. Like
Yeah.
I like let me go talk to my counselor, and he'll look in his book like what year that emotional scar happened, right? Like I like that that is the moment I learned that lesson.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I love that. I mean, I think that especially you saying you didn't come from a logistics background or anything. When you get put into the fire like that a little bit, and you just gotta. That's one of the things that's so exciting is like you just got to figure it out and you just got to get it done right because
Right.
there's this mountain of orders and it's not getting smaller, right? It's getting bigger,
That's
right?
right.
And you just got to figure out how are we going to get through this? How are we going to do this? And you start to learn so much about those things. So I love that story. I mean, I think it's fantastic to hear about how you kind of got that crash course there a little bit and started to
Yes.
figure out all these different things.
Yes.
So really interesting stuff to hear about Amplifier's journey, your journey, and some of the trials and tribulations there, I guess we could say, and growing this thing and figuring out how to really optimize the operation. So So now here in 2025, you guys are launching this new feature called amplification, right?
Right. Yes.
So
Maybe we
tell
should.
us, yeah, tell us all about that. What is that?
Maybe we should have made it not a tongue twister. The So coming back to the origin story of the idea that we were watching customers get really excited about the brand when the brand told them in some way, I see you. And not just like, I see that you bought your 100th thing, but like, I see that you're an investment banker, right?
Mm,
Or I see that you've made these comments in my forum and I'm going to make that joke back to you, right?
mm,
Those moments of realization, it's a kind of connection. I'm still enough of a philosophy major to be like is it a real connection between humans? No, it's
mm,
not, but it's it's actual. Like something is happening that is meaningful in the signal sent from a brand to a customer. When it's not when it's not obviously a robot or a robot at all, when it's a
mhm,
human saying something, and like we know this, like when we buy something from a small brand and they literally write a note on the packing slip from the brand owner like thank you for ordering this, or I see that you've ordered two, I see that this is your third order of this thing, like, and I feel like you would like this pair of socks because it
mm,
goes with the three things that you purchased, like, and I'm just giving it to you just because I
mm,
happen to be here on the line, like it's the day that the owner's like packing one of the boxes, and or they see an order come in, and this would happen with the spare. You see an order come in, and you just recognize the name, like it's a famous person,
mm.
like
Yeah,
this is, and it's somebody like you're a fan of, and so at that moment you're like opening your desk drawer and you're rummaging through like what can I put in this box, like
yeah.
what cool stuff, like oh I'm gonna give them this, and you run out to the floor and you find where it is in the process, and you like dump it in, and you like put a little note like I'm your biggest fan XXOO, like Macon, right?
Mhm.
And so when they get it, that recipient, you're sending them a signal in that
Yeah,
recipient gets it and says, "Oh, that's cool."
yeah.
So that's in on the human level. When we started Amplifier, that's the thing we wanted to do. We wanted to enable our clients to do the things they would do if it was their warehouse. Now, there's a couple things about that. Like, even if it's their warehouse,
Mm,
everybody in logistics listening to this who's in operations knows, like, please, for the love, front office, do not walk onto my floor and mess up my flow. Right? Like,
yeah.
that's like from the brand owner perspective, they're like, hey, how hard can this be? Let me go, like, put
Yeah,
put this squeezy toy in this box. And the line is like, why are
yeah,
you
you
doing
just
this to me?
mess up the entire flow, yeah.
Um, so there's that's a problem even if you own the warehouse, but that's what you would do if you were a brand owner. You'd go out and do
Right,
that, and it's real. And so we've been trying to build an operation that allows for that kind of interruption, or plans for that kind of interruption, and invites that kind of interruption, because that's because it's not a thing. It's also not a thing that's going to happen all the time, right? If it were going to happen all the time, it wouldn't be an interruption. You just
mm,
put an insert thing on the line that's just going to drop in inserts, right? But the the view here is it's the really, like, it's the unique and special moments that really make a difference, that really amplify your brand. And
mm,
so we had this notion of being able to customize a shipment, and not, which is different from, say, taking an item and customizing the item. So if I'm purchasing something from the New Warehouse Podcast store and
mhm,
I want my monogram on it, like, that's me, the customer, customizing a product I'm buying from you. Totally great. Amplifier does that too, because it's
mhm.
actually, if you can't do that, you can't do the thing we're getting ready to do, right? So we
Okay,
had to first, like, we got into direct to garment printing because we wanted to experiment and get good at like knowing where a particular thing was in the warehouse and putting special sugar on it so it could go. Like there's a flavor of decorating that's part of this. And so we do that for clients as well. We do engraving and that sort of thing. So we do customizing items.
Mm.
But what we're talking about is there's this object called a shipment, which is, deep logisticians know like a shipment's not an order, right? A
Mhm.
person places an order, that's going to have one to many shipments. And what we're talking about is the order stays the same, but we're going to do something to this shipment, and that's unique. And so we need to do a bunch of things around that. We need to know, like, what, at the end of the day, what did you put in it? Like, we need
Mm.
to know. We need to track that. We need to
Yeah.
track it in a meaningful way. We also need to bill for it.
Mm.
Um, and and we want to allow that thing to change the entire profile of the shipment.
Mm.
Like it's like it's one thing to just put a drop in. Like a drop in is like, it's a thing. It doesn't
Yeah.
change the profile of the shipment. Nobody actually has to care. And we probably aren't even tracking, right? We're just telling you. Like, by the way, Amplifier tracks it. But
Mm.
there are 3PLs who are just like, of course we put it in. Like,
Yeah.
well, but I don't see any in their digital record. So we track
Mm.
all that too. But we want to allow a brand owner to put something bigger in it that changes the box entirely
Mm.
and changes everything about the profile. Because if you're the brand owner and this is Johnny TikTok, you better put something really cool in there. It's not a
Yeah.
photocopy of like a letter. It is a handwritten note, and like the sweats that he said he's going to buy for his grandma you saw on TikTok the other week, and like you're just going to give it to him, right?
Mm.
That's going to change the shipment. And so that's the brand owner customizing a shipment for the recipient, that the
Mhm.
recipient experiences as a new thing, an unexpected moment. And then if the brand is doing that for the people that matter, and Amplifier doesn't know what people matter to your brand,
Yeah.
we just want to let you go to the UI and pause a shipment, and then the modal appears. Just like, what do you want to do to it? Like,
Mm.
you want to write something on the packing slip? Totally good. That's a thing now at Amplifier. You, the brand owner, are writing a note to the recipient on the packing slip.
Mm.
Okay, super great. Coming in 2025, do you want to actually have a handwritten note? So Amplifier has a RoboPen that will handwrite a note
Mhm.
and put that in there. Do you want to add a bunch of stuff to it? Like, because what's the point of handwriting a note if you're not like, hey, have this free widget, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can do that. And then Amplifier, of course, needs to track that. It's a thing in your inventory.
Mhm.
Um, and then and then sort of next step after that is we do all this customizing of items. Like, why wouldn't the brand owner be like, oh, let's totally get the mug, like put their name on the mug, put
Mm.
that in there, right? So
Yeah.
from the logistics nerd standpoint is, whoa, like, wait a second, that means you can't manifest that container until the very last minute,
Mm.
because you need to keep that wide open. If you're just printing the label at the beginning of the day, and
Yeah.
like, and then that, so you've locked that
And then you
shipment,
add something. Yeah.
you can't do that. And if you don't have a way in the path of the workflow, at the workflow, there always have to be these exit points
Mm.
where the human goes like, oh, wait, something changed from the moment this was put on the floor to now. I now am going to divert this. Or why won't the system let me print the slip for this? Like, oh, because look at the screen. It says, take this to like work area 1, where we're going
Mm.
to put in the magic fairy dust that's been requested. And then it'll go back into the flow for the shipment. So there's a lot of technical sort of coding that you got to do to sort of know where all the state of the shipment is.
Yeah.
And then there's the UI part of it. And then there's just the willingness to stop a thing. And
Mm.
so you can create logistical flow in your operation by locking things down, right? Like,
Mm.
look, this is a concrete tube. Once it enters the top, you may not touch it. Like, you're never touching it again,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah.
but if you don't do that, and you can do that in a couple ways, you only need a couple controls, right? You just, at start of day, like, boom, nothing can change now.
Mm.
But you have to build controls all along the path if you're going to let people like divert and change. And we're not huge. Like,
Mm.
Amplifier has a 110,000 square foot warehouse. We
Okay.
don't have a ton of, on one level, we don't have a ton of automation, um, so that we have to actually have all these software controls for the humans that are doing things. We need to
Mm.
we need to have people do it, but also we don't have a lot of automation, which means that we can do all this stuff. It
Yeah.
means that sort of at any
Can
point
be a little more
we don't.
flexible. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a general principle of like, don't bolt things down.
Mm.
One, we haven't, because we will let, um, our minimum order quantity for a new client is zero, right?
Oh, wow.
You
Okay.
just have to sign up and pay the monthly, subscription fee for Amplifier, and you can
Mm.
be a client. And so, that's super great. It means that we have on purpose decided we don't know what the shipment profile will be tomorrow.
Mm.
Like, and we're gonna handle that with our processes and software, because not only do we not know what's going to happen tomorrow
Mm.
in terms of like what new client's going to come, but we also don't know at the beginning of the day, we don't know what the shipment profile is going to look like at the end of the day, because we're
Yeah.
inviting a client to change it along the way. This is where we come back to, like, we didn't get into logistics because we knew about logistics. This is really dumb. this is this is really not the way to start a 3PL
Yeah.
and like start making money immediately, because the way you do that is you only keep your flow is exactly what you're doing today,
Mm.
like, and you have pruned it all, but we have always been very open about sort of conceptually about what we're going to do and how we're going to add new things, which means that a lot of the automation plays were like, well, yeah, that's actually, if we knew that 60% of our shipments were going to be books, we would
Mm.
100% get that machine, because you would configure it and it would do the thing and then you'd be
Yeah.
off. Like if we were only selling supplements, like, and we know that like supplements are going to, we just know they're going to be from this size to this size and they're going to weigh a
Mm.
certain amount. Like, yeah, we can have a machine that does a bunch of those. Instead, we've had to get really good at, you might call it changing the die, right?
Mm.
Like 1 minute die change has got to happen
Yeah.
all the time at Amplifier, right? So that's a nod to Deming. So the other guy on that Facebook post you put me with. So happy about that. Um, so yeah, that's the amplification. That is a shipment customization, which,
Mm.
by the way, we have two patents on that process. So the
Oh, okay.
amplifier
Interesting.
amplifier owns the patents for changing. I'm not joking. Like
Yeah.
changing a shipment. I can't remember if it's an order or a shipment mid-flight as a result of the input of the
Mm.
um, the brand owner. So that's cool. We got them a while ago because we're like, this should be a thing that people do. We're going to try
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do it. The
Yeah.
minute we do it, it's going to be like, well, yeah, that's actually a great idea. Let me do it. Like, well, that's why we got the patents on it.
Yeah.
It's also a commentary on the patent system, which is like, really, you can patent that? As it turns out, you can.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I mean, very interesting stuff with your making, and I love how you guys are looking at it in a different way, right? And you're trying to, stick to that, essentially the root and the cause of like, what you guys were trying to do with the brand initially, right? Despair, and keeping that fun, more customized feel for the customer, which I think for a brand these days, like, you're trying to stand out as much as possible because so many people are getting so much stuff online,
right.
right? And like, how do you give them that unique experience? And I think that's a great approach to do that. So really appreciate you coming on the show today and giving us the story of Amplifier and your story too of figuring out how to make operations better and ultimately this unrolling of amplification as well, and what that's kind of going to bring to the market for brands as well. So really appreciate your time. And if people are interested in learning more about Amplifier or getting in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you can go to amplifier.com and see what we've got there. And I'm on LinkedIn, just Macon Stokes at LinkedIn. And I'm super happy to uh, hear from people, take a DM. Folks can email me at mstokes at Amplifier if they want. But I try to be, I mean, there are people who are super active on LinkedIn. I try to be semi-active. I try to at least keep up with what's going on, and so that's a fine place to reach out and connect. Um, and if you have followed me on LinkedIn, you know that you can come into the office anytime if you are holding a box of donuts. That is the secret key to getting into the CEO's office is like, did you show up at Amplifier with a box of donuts? Probably good to see you. So that's the play.
I love that tip. That was my tip as well when I was a plant manager previously. When I would get those cold emails from, especially from carriers, right? Can we come to
Yeah,
your business? And I would say my shipping team loves donuts. So
exactly.
we got a lot of donuts
Yeah.
that way, definitely. So we'll put that
Oh
out
wait,
there,
you
and we'll
shared them?
definitely.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I should share them.
So we'll definitely put all that information about Amplifier and how to get in touch with you at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in the show notes. So, Macon, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, the New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.